Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 33 of Tour of Japan, the review series for the Super GT machines of GT6. And in this episode we're featuring another one of the NSX GT500 models. This is the Team Loctite version of the NSX. It's one of the slightly older shape NSX models that are on the game, alongside the most notably Mobile 1, which tends to get the most use of these older generation models. This model though is interesting in a few ways. Visually it's considerably different to the others, quite an eye-catching livery. Again, most notably about the livery is the wheel rims, which are different colours from the front to the rear, which is a nice touch. I like things like that in racing cars. It sets them apart, makes them stand out. You could say it's a gimmick, but sometimes I think gimmicks are good. As far as spec, it's powered by a 3.5 litre engine, just like all of the other NSX models, old and new, regardless of whether they're premium or not. Fully tuned, it puts out 898 horsepower, which is the exact same horsepower as the Mobile 1 NSX. It puts out 516 foot-pounds of torque, and it weighs in at the slightly heavier end of the GT500 spectrum at 1150 kilos. Still not the heaviest, but one of the slightly heavier models. It sits at just over 650 pp, which interestingly enough is actually slightly higher than the Mobile 1 NSX, despite all of its other specs being identical, which is an interesting point. 1 pp higher, to be exact, than the Mobile 1 version, and the power to weight ratio per tonne is 781. So it's not really class leading in any particular way, but it does have pretty much the highest pp of any of the older generation NSX models. And that's an interesting thing to note about the car. Not necessarily an advantage, but just a fact. In terms of overall performance in a straight line and around the track, the differences between this car are very minimal. The lap times are very similar, the top speed and acceleration are very similar, so the fact that the PP is the highest of the older NSXs is almost irrelevant in terms of actual performance. The only relevance it does have is it means that unfortunately you may have to detune this car more than some of the others in order to get it to fit into a certain PP. For instance, 650 or 625 or 600, etc. Overall, the car doesn't suffer too much because the NSXs are pretty strong all-round models, and I have to say, as far as the handling goes, this is, from my first impressions anyway, a slightly trickier handling model of the NSX range, particularly of the older generation NSXs. You would be forgiven for assuming that they're all pretty much of a muchness, but that's not the case. Each of them does definitely have their own distinct personality, and this one seems to be a little bit more challenging as far as handling. It's a little bit more skittish, a little bit more prone to getting its tail out around corners. It's not something which is chronic or makes it undrivable by any means, but it's an interesting thing to note about the car overall. Now, as far as price, it's priced exactly the same as all of the other older NSXs at 750,000 credits. And overall, I would say this is a model which is good for its PP. If you're looking for purely the highest spec NSX of the older models, then this one is the highest. But if you're looking for the best NSX in terms of what it can actually do, both in a straight line and around corners, it's certainly not worse, but it's not particularly better either. So with the NSXs, particularly of the older generation, because with the newer models it does vary a bit more, but with the older generation in particular, it's pretty much just a case of choosing whichever one you prefer the look of. The fact is, with this one, the PP is, as I said, 1 PP higher than the next nearest NSX, which is the Mobile 1 model, and that is something to bear in mind when you're buying one. But overall, its actual performance around the track is very, very similar to the other older NSXs. And overall, this NSX, I would say, definitely prefers higher speed flowing corners to low speed hairpin corners. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.